Nation. We're back with John J. Kerecz. He's running for the transhumanist. He's running to be the Transhumanist Party nominee to run as the president of the United States. Welcome back, John J. Kerecz.
Well, thank you, Steele, for having me back. It's been a week now, I guess over a week, almost 2 weeks.
Yep.
Some things have happened since last. I mean, last time I talked to you about, Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, which got me started thinking about longevity and different things you could do to extend your life way back in the 70s. And actually, the funny thing is, this week I did order some more vitamins and concoctions from them, as a matter of fact, and just got them yesterday. So I'm still active with that. I had apologized. I'm a little scruffier than I'd like to have been for this, but this week I did pull a muscle in my back that had, yesterday morning, actually, I had a nice hump. It was swollen, but I had to go into the office and do emergency tabletop training. So I went and did that anyhow, a lot better today. Me and you had talked, I guess, chatted through messaging about still doing some physical jobs. It's always good to do physical jobs. One of my part-time jobs, I do some work at a tool store, and I have to do some work in the warehouse there. So every so often you hurt something, but it's good to be up doing something.
Yeah. The Bible says your body is a temple, so try and take care of it within that context. Whether you're a biblical person or not, I think that's very sound advice.
That's something that ties me in with the longevity and living a long time is I enjoy doing physical things. I don't really want to get to the point where I can't do physical things, and prolonging your life some of that is so that you can prolong the enjoyment of doing things, no matter what it is. Even if it's working, if you enjoy having a job where you're working in a warehouse, moving things around, if you enjoy doing that, you should be able to do that past 100 or so if you can. I think that's part of life, and some of that's the enjoyment of life.
Yeah. Life is about enjoying the gift, and what you enjoy doing is subjective. For some people, it's running up and down the street. For other people, it's watching TV. Other people, it's working in a warehouse. Other people, it's watching sunsets. For other people, it's partying. It's subjective. And one day it might be one thing, and the next day it might be something else. So this is very true. But within the context of, having a finite sort of existence with scarcity and all that other stuff, I mean, you have to you have to really think profoundly about who, what, when, where, why, and how. Is what I want to get into you about, because you've done some of that. You've done some yoga. You've done some Hinduism. You've done some all this sort of stuff, going deep inside yourself. I was actually thinking after I read your book, you're the Alan Watts of this show. You're the Alan Watts of this show. This is how I characterize you, because of your unique perspective on the spiritual side of mixing the enjoyment and of life and how you perceive life, but also the practical side, which Alan Watts is too much of a philosopher. He's just on the philosophy side, but you actually grab the other hand of life and take some risks, and that explodes out in your space adventure and your travels and your hiking and all the other things that you've done. So we'll get into that really soon. But yeah, you're the Alan Watts of Detonation.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I'll stay that for a while then. That'd be great. I guess since we talked, I sent you my autobiography and also my kids' book, which basically go over the same story. That's what you were referring to. My kids' book is, let's see. I don't know if you can see that. Dream It, Do It. And then I also have my autobiography. And to tell you the truth, both are on Amazon, but to tell you the truth, they're both actually the same story, to tell you the truth. And then I'm doing this sci-fi series that is for adolescents. I've done the first books out, and the next two are coming out shortly. And to tell you the truth, those are still the same story. So I figure if you have a good story to tell in your life, tell it in different ways. And it's a story I know. So years ago, I used to do interviews. If you ever go on to oshradio.com on YouTube, there's interviews I did with a lot of musicians and comedians and stuff. And comedians one time said something to me about the best thing in your life to make joke. The best thing to make jokes about is your actual life, because that you put your actual self into, your soul into, and you into.
Yeah.
Moving things around there on me, but so that's the same way I did with the books, and I try to do that with my own life. I try to, live what I say and talk about. I try not to be one of those people that says one thing and does another thing.
Yeah. Living like actionable, having an actionable life, having a life that's not just about talking. There's a lot of people who talk. I mean, talking's pretty easy. You just sort of say stuff, but actually doing it is fairly intense. And we did mention your MIG experience, and I mean, you mentioned in your book that when you got back to the office, everybody said, "Oh, why can't I do this?" or "I wish I could do this," or "It wouldn't it be so cool?" or something. But it's a lot different to actually doing the action of actually flying over there and participating in such an adventure. So, yeah, talking is easy. Doing is hard, and I think that separates the it's doing is hard. Doing is hard because it takes planning and effort and spiritual consideration and a bit of dreaming, which is the central theme to your
Dream it, do
experience.
it.
Yeah, this dreaming is absolutely central to what I found. Everything you've tried to achieve, and it's driven you and what you've been trying to do.
And the other thing is, you can't have people tell you can't do certain things, and that comes back to everything. That comes back to this election. That comes back to transhumanistic party, and everything. That if people don't dream at first, it can't happen. And you can't have people tell you can't do it, it'll never happen. Because if people listen to that, we'd probably still be in caves rubbing sticks together. Or we might not even be rubbing sticks together, because somebody would probably say, no, you can't make fire by rubbing sticks together. That's silly. So it takes people being, I guess, I heard a good statement. What time was it? Was it the meek shall inherit the earth and the bold shall inherit the stars?
Yeah.
So you can't pay attention to that. That's something about what the message of Dream It, Do It's about too, is you dream things, and you can't have people telling you can't do it, or listen to those people.
And the naysayers. Let's talk about naysayers for a sec, because maybe naysayers do have a point, right? They might have some sort of actual point, but you just listen to the advice, and you accept it as advice, and you either accept the advice or reject the advice, right? Naysayers don't always mean badly, right?
Well, I think naysayers can affect you different ways. Naysayers can either hinder you or they can push you. It all depends sometimes on your personality and how your makeup is, how that works. I think sometimes with my own personality, sometimes naysayers actually push me along. You get that attitude, I'll show you, I'm going to do it anyhow. But it depends on a person's personality with that. And I think, getting back to government also, I think sometimes governments control people by naysaying in some ways, and people are sometimes afraid to try things.
Yeah.
And I just think that through history, not necessarily in the present, but through history, I think a lot of times people have been controlled by some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. We'll go to the first chapter of your book here, and the dreamer, and you said like there's different dreams for different people. Some guy from Kansas, Kentucky, or something. His dream is just to go to New York and just see what his country has produced, the Statue of Liberty, French thing or whatever. But has produced. The city itself. Whereas the New York woman, a high-powered woman. Might have a completely different dream, and it's an efficiency bias within, so she can operate her company and get a massage at the same time while flying in a jet to and from the Caribbean or something, right?
He might want to go to New York for the weekend, and she might want to go have Starbucks at the Louvre for the weekend.
And these dreams are different, but they're the same, right? In a similar context.
It's the same concept. Whatever is important to you and expands yourself.
Mm.
I've always thought of. I always had a concept called. I called it ascentology. It's not. It means you try to you want to ascend in life above what you've been, and I think that can be different ways. It can be with technology. It can be spiritual. Some way that you want to ascend, and everybody's ascension and change and growth is differently.
Yeah.
It's a I had started my doctorate in adult education. I had my bachelor's and master's in engineering, but I'd started my doctorate in education. And back when I was doing my doctorate, what was really big was the contract. And adults in adult educations were behind. You wrote a contract with what you wanted to learn and what you wanted to do in life and what you wanted to get out of things. And everybody's contract is different, and that's how I look at that whole thing. Everybody's, like you said, everybody's dreams are different. Everybody, what they want out of life is different. And I think that's part of also wanting to increase lifespans and people live longer. Is, to me, it's so you can do more and you can experience more. And I think I had said on the last show is I do like art, but I think of art as many different things: music, pictures, even writing books. I have a funny little album here, which was my Three Shades of Crazy John that I had done years ago. And I believe art is a great something that man has. That, like I said, there are some animals that do show art. You know, chimpanzees, even elephants have shown the ability to paint and do stuff. But the longer our lifespan could be, I think the amazing things we could create as human beings and do uh, in this world and other worlds and help each other. I think it could be amazing the utopia we might be able to create through longevity.
And these dreams are like winds, yeah, and you've been carried off on the sails of adventures around the world. You've been all around the world, haven't you? Been to Turkey, China, all over the place, right? Machu
I haven't been to
Picchu.
South America yet, and I haven't been to Machu Picchu. That's the next place I wanted to go.
Oh, you're next on your
I
list,
had
yeah.
I had some money to go to Machu Picchu, and that went to my daughter's wedding. So it was money well spent, though. But it went into my daughter's wedding. Yeah, I've been to Egypt. I've been to China. I've been to what I call the new major cities. I've been to London. I've been to Paris. I've been to Barcelona. I've been to Amsterdam. I've been in Scotland and Ireland. But then I've also been to Egypt. I've been to Rome. I've been to Athens. I've been to Istanbul. So I've been to the older cities and the newer cities. I myself find people basically mostly the same everywhere you go. People are people. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that say, "Oh, how different places are," but to me, I think people are basically people. There's not a real big difference, as much as people think. I think there's more similarities no matter where you go than differences. I don't know how you feel.
Well, it was interesting reading your book because you mentioned that travel really broadens the mind and broadens your cultural perception, and there are differences, obvious differences, but um, well, not especially. That's a bad word, but in your own life, when you go back to a certain geography with a certain context of people in your own town or city, you get caught up in doing the daily things in order to survive, and that cements in your mind a way of the world, how the world operates, and your cultural context, and and that uh, going outside of that cultural context, it's very easy to think that that cultural context is the superior context only because you become acclimated to it, used to it. It's normalized. It's part of who you are. You think of what those people are doing and how they do it and how they operate and the language they speak and the clothes they wear as an extension of because we're primitive beings and we claim things. So we say, "Hey, that guy there, he's part of me," and he does that every day. That's the postman or whatever. And traveling undoes all this. It it says on different levels. It says that we are somewhat the same. There's some sort of humanity. We're all humans stringed together, But at the same time, you know, um, there's certain geographical, cultural, linguistic concepts that bubble up and formulate a difference, which is why we go to these places. It's not just for the natural beauty to experience the different ideas, and it's mainly comes through ideas, right? It's mainly ideas that are different, right?
Yeah, I think I'm just saying at the core, I think people are mostly the same. At the core, we're all people, and I think sometimes people miss that. I think the cultural differences are very enjoyable. That's what you enjoy about the trip and stuff is the different things. But if you were born in the same area, my thing is I could see that person being me because at the core they're not that different. I'll tell you as far as traveling, first time, the United States is a big country, and we have that famous Route 66, and I first did Route 66 back in 1981, and I like to say I did it when I was 2 years old, of course. But back then, the guy that did the song actually was from Philly, and he sang it about a song about, I think, going from Philly all the way out across Route 66, meeting up Route 66 and going across. So I left from Allentown, which is a little bit north of Philly. But back then in 81, this country was a lot culturally different in different places than it is today. About 2 or 3 years ago, I did part of Route 66 again, and I was surprised at how much more homogeneous even this country has become. And I hate to admit it was 30 some years difference. Of course, I was 2 at the time, so that was okay. But it surprised me at how more homogeneous our own country has become in that time. And I think a lot of that is such as this social media. I'm talking to you in Australia, and back then that was horrible. I'll be honest, my sister had been in the Army back in the early mid 70s, and she was in Texas and I was in Pennsylvania. And just a phone call from Texas to Pennsylvania was horrible back then. And it's just amazing to me how more and more homogeneous things have become. Of course, I'm sure there's a lot of countries that dislike America because they say we're the ones that push our ideals on other people. But the world is becoming more homogeneous, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's good. It's good in the long run because I hope, getting back to worldviews and politic views, that I hope people realize that we are a planet that needs to work together. And, we have to look at it as a global economy and help each country and not have as much individualness is good, but I think we need to learn to work together more.
Yeah,
and I think it's. Go on. I'm sorry.
No, well, this really fits really well with the transhumanist sort of ideology and the fact that the transhumanist thought is that humans are basically good, that human nature is basically good, that people, on the whole, aren't psychopathic. Them, and that runs really well with your thesis. So that's good. You're also a really competitive person. You like jiu-jitsu and kung fu and
Well, actually, I started that when I was 7, not to be competitive, but because I had long hair in the 60s. Of course, then I was -10, and I would get beat up a lot. And I was tall for my age, so therefore the older kids would actually pick fights with me. So I started taking martial arts back in 1967, and I originally started not being competitive. I got to dislike it after a while, but my parents had signed me up for the black belt program, which meant they were in a contract and I went whether I didn't want to go or not. So later in my life, I have very much realized that having to stick that out has become part of me, and it was good in the long run. But that's how I got involved in that, and that kind of always made me want to enjoy individual sports. Like in high school, I wrestled. I ran cross country in junior high and in college, and which probably led to some of the reasons of why I have some fake parts in my legs from wearing them out doing things. But yeah, that's kind of why I got into that and got competitive in that. Is originally for self-defense, but yet I enjoyed the one-on-one competition. So.
Yeah, that's really good, and it's discipline is not a bad thing. I mean, discipline is an excellent thing. It's character building, and it's good in that way. And yeah, discipline is a very interesting thing, to be honest. But yeah, so you're well disciplined from early age because of an external force which was coming upon you, and you decided to do something about it rather than hide in the corner, which is brave, to say the least. Your academic career, your engineering career. What happened there? Because I remember you worked at a waste treatment plant first after you graduated.
Well, actually, I worked in there when I was still in college. I originally was going to be a doctor, to tell you the truth, and somewhere along the lines, I realized I got my first degree in chemistry because I was going to feed that into pre-med, and I realized I didn't want to have to worry about people dying on my watch. I was really kind of scared of that. Maybe I should have pushed that, but I kind of floundered a little bit after that, and I got a degree in computer science and data processing because back then it was computer science and data processing. And back when we were doing card punching and riding our dinosaurs, and but and I thought to myself, my father was an engineer, but he was an electrical engineer, and with my chemistry background, I wanted to go into chemical engineering, to be honest with you. But at the time, it was right after that one fuel shortage scare in the late 70s when we had to do odd, even days over here with gas and stuff. And chemical engineering was a packed field. Back then, they were trying to develop syn fuels, and that meant synthetic fuels. They were trying to develop gasoline even out of coal tar, and making artificial gasoline. So getting into chemical engineering was very hard. I went into environmental engineering, which was part of just civil engineering and constructional engineering. And I went that field instead. And while I was also on the environmental engineering, I did a full year when I was doing my master's of nuclear engineering. And I actually worked for EPA for a while, monitoring 3 Mile Island, and
Really?
actually had written my master's thesis on background gamma radiation at 3 Mile Island.
Wow.
So I used to joke that I work with gamma radiation and stuff like Bruce Banner, So don't make me mad.
Yeah, you're gonna be like you're gonna end up like that superhero. What's his name? Anyway, yeah, that superhero.
Doc Samson instead of the Hulk.
Yeah, something like that. Something. Yeah, that's funny. 3 Mile Island. That's I didn't read that. I should.
Actually, it's not too far from where I'm at right now. It's right down the street from here. Actually, matter of fact, 3 Mile Island. Come glow with us.
Do the worms glow? Do the worms glow?
I wish they did. That would be nice. That way you could
Yeah.
go night fishing.
Yeah.
So,
Only in
so
New
that's
Zealand.
yeah. There you go. So that's how I kind of started my school different like that. And working in a wastewater treatment plant was actually good training. From there, I worked in EPA for a little while, watching TMI, and then I did get a job doing permitting for government for wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants. And then I did IT work, and now I'm doing the alternate energy work myself right now. So, solar, electric cars, and stuff like that. I work a lot with the energy assurance, which if there's an accident, say like right now we're having storms down towards Florida and stuff, say that some of the fuel lines our fuel pipelines are messed up. Where are we going to get fuel from? Pull it from other places and stuff. That's a concern with energy assurance. Making sure, sometimes we joke that it's making sure grandma doesn't freeze during the winter, but that is important.
Yeah, it is kind of important. I mean, I know definitely. Yeah, for old people in New York and stuff, when the heat rises, it's not fun for them. So yeah, let's hope that they don't freeze. So well done. You're keeping grandma happy. That's good.
Keeping grandma alive, If
Yeah.
we can't replace her parts, we're going to keep her alive by keeping her warm. How's that?
Yeah, you're transhuman in a way too, because like you're part machine now, aren't you? Part Darth Vader or whatever.
The cyborg. I thought somebody had one of this new symbols for transhumanist party. I think was some eyes or something. Somebody had that, and depending on how the light hits, both my eyes have implants in it. My lenses are artificial in both my eyes. I've had 5 eye operations, 3 retinas, 2 cataract surgeries, and was blind in each eye. So It's interesting vision. It's not quite the same as normal vision. One eye sees distance, one sees for reading. You get used to it. The downside is I get very much more motion sick while out on a boat.
Oh, really?
We went. I was out. One of my adventures was to go shark cage diving, and it's one of those things I wanted to do. Don't ask me why. But the ocean was very bad the day we did it, and he really didn't want to go out. But we all kind of said, "Hey, let's do it." And me and two of the other people we were helping chum the ocean with our own bodily secretions, and off the side of the boat. And to be honest, being in the cage with the sharks hitting it was so much better to me than being on the boat, because I wasn't rocking. I was nice, and I spent a lot of time in that cage that day with the sharks hitting it. But I didn't realize that, since I don't really have natural depth perception, I have a habit of getting seasick more. So that's one of the downsides. But it is also great. I see without glasses, and I haven't done that since junior high. So that's one of the pluses.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you actually slightly got enhanced. I mean, you're not on a boat very much, so so that must be all right. So so you've slightly enhanced your eyesight a little bit, maybe.
Right. I don't have focus ability, so I've noticed, like, if cars go by, getting a license plate number isn't like it's used to be, because my eyes don't focus on the number. So it isn't like something can zoom by and you can say, "Oh, I can. That was this, this, and this." It actually takes you a little time sometimes to think about what you saw, because you kind of have to think about your data. And like my doctors say, your eyes don't actually see, your brain sees. Yeah. Your eyes just collect the data. But the problem is they don't focus on the data. So my mind kind of like looks at it and says, "Hey, now what exactly was that?" So sometimes it's a little bit of a slower process for things that are fast moving. But that's the biggest difference. I noticed difference with my metal parts in my legs. Going out in the motorcycle during the wintertime isn't as much fun with titanium parts that don't have blood flowing through them to heat them up. So they got to make those. They got to make those parts with special heating and cooling things added to them.
Yeah. I didn't really think about that, actually. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it might get a bit cold. Yeah, eyes are really important to me, because I do a lot of reading and stuff, and so I freak out if if my eye starts to go, what the amount of information that I'll start to lose on that side. So yes, eyes are very important, and hopefully we can get more research into eye improvement techniques.
It is actually amazing what they do. Now, I didn't have this done, but a friend of mine had it done. They have lenses that they will put in that they actually do attach to the muscles inside your eye, that then the muscles will still pull on them and they will still focus. So that is interesting, newer technology they have today. Basically, they're putting a fake part in that emulates your original lens and can be hooked into your existing muscles. Wow. And then and they like to do that quickly. With him, they did it like within 3 days. They did the second eye so that his eyes were both still used to focusing and working together, because he had one eye, then the other one done right after it. And he was pretty happy with it.
Wow.
Then again, you still have the trouble with that, though, if you have that degenerative muscle disease in your eyes, though, then that'll still affect your focusing in the long run. But it prolongs it. I guess like with anything, when you're talking about longevity and technology, is a lot of people say, I hear the age, like if you can get someone extended to 120, by that time they're going to have new technology that can extend their life even longer. So the better you can extend it now, hopefully there's more they can do in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point for young people. So we hear a lot on this show about longevity, escape velocity, which is what you're talking about. But start your longevity, escape velocity when you're young, because you've already got a head start in that way. So, don't stop. Just do it when you're young, and keep going, and donate to these causes, and buy the correct corporate products, and buy the right shares and that help these guys out, and all this sort of stuff. If you do all this, and we do this more and more collectively, small group to start with, and And then as we go out, we can speed up this process, and actually get some stuff done, which is what I hope anyone who's watching this show is trying to do. So, that's really important. So we mentioned art before. So you like art, obviously. You like art. Have you got anything else to add to your art? Because that was a chapter in the book.
I think almost anything in life is creation, creating things. I've had, buddy, I love to build my own computers even, and to me that's a form of art. Some people don't think that's art, but it is art. You're creating, you're doing this, you're doing that. I went through a phase where I created computers that were colored and had lights and had sounds and stuff just to be extra cool. I have to admit, my one motorcycle has some light blue lights on it right now too, but all that is an extension of yourself. My daughter went to she went to Votech originally and got a auto body degree in Votech, and now she's gone all over the world doing cosmetics and beauty. She has a went to beauty school, and she doesn't do hair. She does actually makeup and beauty. And people go, well, that's a far step from doing auto body. And it's like, no, it really isn't. Auto body was creating a car and making it look beautiful, and now she's making faces and people look beautiful. It's an extension of it's art, it's beauty, it's extension of you. It spreads into music. There was a time when I used to be combining things. To be honest with you, I once did a class, and I was big on doing classes in art biology, and that's where you sketch and you paint parts of the body. And I very much enjoyed that. I one time had a painting in an art contest that it was a solar system, but in the solar system, all the parts of the solar system were actually parts of the human body. Like the asteroid going around the planet was a pancreas. The part of the planet you actually saw was the cerebrum of the brain. The sun was actually a nerve nucleus with the dendrites and stuff going out of it being like the sun rays. And the little stars weren't actually little stars. They were little bones if you looked at them closely in the background. So it looked like a solar system when you first looked at it, but everything in the solar system was a part of the human body. So
Wow.
that was it. Didn't win. It got an honorable mention, but it didn't win. But I won't mention what won. Something won that was a picture of I will mention what it was. It was a picture of a cello in multiple shades of purple. But I think the universe with multiple parts of the body was a little bit out there for some people, but it's an expression of art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And music. I've done all kinds of
Yeah,
music
DJ.
from
Yeah,
country. I've done DJing. I've been in bands that play classic rock. I have to admit the band that I played in that got paid the best was probably my country western band, because people love country westerns. It's easy listening. But I had a record deal with Island Palm for my band I was in, which was Seventh Layer, and you can still get them on Amazon, but we don't get the money. It goes to Island Palm. But we basically did rap with metal behind it. And we used to play at a lot of the, talking about insane clown posse events. We played at a lot of them in their gatherings. And one time we played at one of the gatherings with 29,000 people, which was kind of interesting to be playing in front of that many people. And that was enjoyable. But right now I do have a song out called No Vacation Blues with Joey Wells, which is, he was the second keyboardist for Bill Haley and the Comets. And
really?
it is getting some play because people follow Joey Wells. Me and him are coming out with a new song shortly. And the last song was blues. This one's going to be a little bit more rock. But it's a lot different than my other stuff. But on this one, I just have a partial writing. The song was my idea. Me and him worked on it together, and then he recorded it. My voice is pretty bad anymore. But the next song, I'm going to be on the chorus. Let's so you can hear the chickens and the dogs will be howling in the background from the sound and the screeching on the chalkboard. But I like all forms of art. It's I think that's sort of man's way of expressing their soul.
Yeah, that's a nice thought. Man's way of expressing their soul. That's interesting. Yeah, because art is the overflow of excess food. It's the thing that it's the thing that you get once you have civilization all worked out and you have time and then you make art. So yeah, it is kind of.
Although I think people made art even when things weren't well. The cavemen's painted on the walls and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, but I mean, they had to have all the hierarchy of needs, right? So they had to have shelter. Obviously, was taken care of because they were in a cave. You know, food was taken care of because obviously they were alive. You know, so you know, probably had the animal skin or whatever. But the point is like art's a mixture of things. It's storytelling. It's being
exactly.
the soul. It's a form of communication. It's an expression of beauty and thanks and praise. You know, if you're a
And it
religious
could also
person,
be another form of immortality.
yeah. This Ernst Becker idea of you know cultural immortality. So giving you something to live from, which is beyond you, and I like that as well. I think yeah, and for me, you know, art is it's something that should be defined between cultures. You know, you were talking about like this is you know you're talking about the United States becoming more homogenous. I mean, it's sad if you start to eliminate art and it becomes homogenous. You know, we're getting that in a little way just because of the amount of art on the curve that there is in the world. You have a huge assortment of art, but actually, if you look what popular art is, you know, which is pop music or something like that. I mean, there is a global culture of art. There's, you know, there's the big ones. I don't watch it much, but you know, some of these big Beyonce or something or whatever. And these are the big artists. Or in India, you've got some
Right.
big Bollywood stars that flow out into the wider world or something like that. But you do have a sort of global cultural art experience, which is kind of interesting. But because of the sheer amount of art nowadays, you can see the distinct cultures, and I would like to see, despite the internet and despite the breaking down of cultural barriers, I would like to see art, if anything, remain culturally immune. You know, I'd like to see some Indian art. I'd like to see some European art. I'd like to see some American art. You know, and not have everything just fused into a singularity context within the art world.
Well,
I
I don't think things are ever quite fused like that. Because even if you go to places, you know, like I travel and you go to like Memphis, and Memphis, you think of in your brain as blues, but then you hear a lot of top 40s and you hear a lot of pop, and then you think of New Orleans as jazz, but you go down there and you still hear pop and you hear blues, and I think it's a like I said, it's a different people have different souls and different culture have different souls, and I think there's parts of people's history that you're not going to necessarily get rid of. And talking about taking this back to government again, I think it's a bad move when governments cut art in schools, cut music in schools, even cutting back on sports. I hate to say it, is bad because I think sports, in a way, is man's outlet for some of his natural aggression and competition that we need to some extent.
mm,
And I think man needs a lot of this stuff in his life to be fuller and actually to release parts of himself that he needs, you know, satisfied.
but
And when you take that away, it hinders, and I think it can make unrest that people don't know why people are having unrest. You don't know why it leads to this group of people over here being more maybe agitated or something because you're not giving them things they need fully as a person.
yeah. The reason I express this in this way is because if you come down here to Australia, you, as an American, you would expect to see Australian art everywhere, right? But our art has been so infused with America that basically we've become culturally American, and you would
Those
have
damn American pigs, you know?
uh,
Yeah, that's what I said earlier
you,
about
you, you, you
cultures.
yeah, you would have to. You would be very hard pressed. I mean, as a tourist, you'd find it, but you'd actually have to look to find unique Australian art, unique Australian bands, unique Australian culture. You would have to look because on the surface, it's America. Like I would have no problem going from here to the United States and seeing all the same celebrities, all the same talk shows, all the same hosts, all the same pictures and paintings and nowadays unique building styles, architecture, very very culturally American. And underneath the surface, it's quite easy to find, and that's what I'm saying. It's underneath the surface, it's quite easy to find. Japan is the same thing because it's been an American colony for so long. culturally, they have a little bit of a unique perspective, but
Well, I thought we were a Japanese colony. I thought that worked out the other way. No.
but you know they still have their own art stuff, but they have a very culturally American system as well. And I'm not blaming America here, and I'm not blaming any country or anything like that. But I am saying I hope that that underneath, as someone on the outside of America, who's seen what it can do. We can all sort of maintain that even under the subset and under the surface. And
I
American
have to
might.
admit, I have to admit, within the last, say, 10 years that I've traveled, I have seen more and more. My last trip, me and my sister were over to Germany, England, Scotland, Ireland, Amsterdam. And I was surprised that even within the last 5 years, how much more I saw advertisements for American TV shows and American movies. And I think some of that has to do with the streaming services and how everybody everywhere is using the streaming services more than regular television.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me how that's changed.
And Europe is an especially interesting point because you have a refugee crisis there, and so those people are simultaneously trying to discover their own culture while being inundated with American culture, and so you end up with a very angry subclass of traditionalists, which is what Merkel doesn't like and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very interesting topic. But let's go on to a crescendoing point of your life because you've had some medical problems and issues, and you fought through
Which are my
those.
own fault, to be honest with you. I mean,
Overtraining, right?
Overtraining or just doing crazy things and doing lots of crazy things. I've been asked, well, if you knew then what would happen now, would you do it? And I thought about that. I thought, well, maybe I would have done it more if I would have known that I would have blown out. I had to have my hip replaced, had to have my eyes worked on from doing contact sports. I mean, maybe I would have held back less if I knew I was going to have things replaced anyhow. I'm not sure, but I think you do certain things in life and you enjoy doing them, and that's part of what makes you you. Sitting around and being scared of things isn't the way to be. I mean, in the old days, there were football players I remember they interviewed, and that was back in the days when they didn't wear as much body protection. And they interviewed a bunch of the football players that couldn't walk well and they were hurt and stuff. And they said, well, would you go back and do it? And they all said, sure, they'd go back and do it because that's what they loved. And if it's what you love, you got to do it. It's, your life is, you are, part of you is your experiences and what you did and what you learned from those experiences. And if you don't do that, you don't experience that and learn. You grow through your experiences. Mm. And that's one of the things that we said we'd also maybe mention some technology today. Yep. And, some of my views on how to extend our lives, I myself would prefer to still be in mostly humanistic, let me put it that way, mostly humanistic body. I enjoy being in the flesh, let's say. But my concern is the fact that you do wear out the flesh, and I've worn out parts of my flesh. I consider the concept of totally downloading my mind into a computer as a last reserve or a backup to me. I would prefer to be in the flesh in some way, or have my body repaired through clone parts or nanites. We had briefly mentioned nanites go through repairing my body. I would even hope that you could clone parts, and even if part of your brain, you had a stroke, part of your brain was shot, have part of a clone part put in, and have the rest of your brain, or maybe even with a computer backup, help you rebuild that part of your brain so that it would still be mostly in the flesh. And I would even hope myself right now that, like, with the fake joints are nice. I still go to the gym, and I can't lift as much as I used to. The day before I had my hip replaced, I was at the gym doing 1,200-pound leg presses because I knew it was the last day I was able to do that. Now I do 400 pounds, and I get yelled at for doing that because I probably shouldn't do that higher. But if I go higher with the weight, I might end up with a titanium piece up in my neck or something. But so there's setbacks to that. I would like to have actual human parts in me again that I know would work the way they did work.
So
I
you think?
think. Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, Aubrey de Grey is big on this biological singularity, this idea. But yeah, this idea that the human body is a car, and you can replace the parts that wear out, and you can continuously go on, and that the human body is important in the fact that it's an important machine and it's an important vehicle to accomplishing things. And so for you, the brain is actually very important because your body is sort of a manufactured vehicle. It's a sort of a vehicle to feed your brain, right? And I mean that's what it does. It's all.
It is, but I believe in the theory that some of the stuff you do some of the stuff you do is learned in your body and in all other parts of your nerves and your spinal cord. There's some ways that you react, and there's memory, muscle memory, and stuff that is also part of you. I so much I'm going to bring up a TV show, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to bring up Battlestar Galactica. I don't know if you saw the second Battlestar Galactica, the most recent one, where they I thought it was interesting because it kind of took off from the original one that I liked in the late 80s, I guess that was on, where the Cylons went off and they made synthezoids. I'd call them synthezoids. They're synthetic human beings. And the Cylons, which you thought of as robots, were actually in some ways more religious and believed more in God than the humans did. And what they ended up doing was creating synthezoids, a certain number of synthezoids that couldn't tell apart from human beings. And they got to the point where they actually got pregnant and had babies with human beings. And they are who originally in the show then went and colonized the earth. So, in other words, you had robots break off of human beings, consider themselves the next phase of evolution. But then to them, they realized that actually the flesh, the wetware machinery that we go, I forget what grinders call that, the meat flesh machine, was actually more versatile than the metal was in the long run for what it could do. And they evolved back into the flesh and joined with human beings genetically and had kids, and it came back around where the scary part was kind of where the show left. You're like, oh, we're not as human as we thought we are. We were robots that became synthezoids. Now, mind you, I say synthezoids. Synthezoids are basically a creating being that is the same as more or less kind of human, but it's a synthetic human. So that was an interesting twist to that story plot, and I kind of think on that one, and I think a lot of people that are thinking about computers and robots and some of the perfectionism might find that in the long run it might come back around. Our bodies, although there seem to be things that I remember they were saying about computers and how computers are great for crunching data and moving information and giving you things quicker, but yet it's hard for a computer to make a robot walk and be able to do all the things that we do already at 1 year old.
And this is
so there's more than just crunching data and storing information and storing data and storing experience. There's more to us that evolution over all these years has designed and created within us.
Yeah, I really like this point because it really asks the question, and you're asking a very deep philosophical, pseudo-spiritual question about what is a human being. Are they the sum of their net experiences, or are they what they are? Is their body part of who they are? Is who they are part of how other people perceive they are? Is their emotions part of it? And because there's so many unknowns with uploading yourself to a computer. I mean, would you just become a number crunching facilitator of digits and Star Treks, or even if you could become anything you wanted? I mean, if you go into this world and you become anything you wanted, I mean, even if you've done that before and that's why you are what you are now, I mean, is that really what you are? And that's a really deep philosophical question. Some people, even life extensionists, want to extend their lives so they can live on the edge of life because they like living on the edge of life because they're addicted to living on the edge of life. One of these
The
scientists.
crazy people that go to space and go to Mount Everest, right?
Yeah, well, you're yeah, exactly. You're one of these, Doctor Alexander something. He's on my friends list. But anyway, he just jumped off one of these big towers behind me in Hong Kong. He's one of these huge towers and did the thing. And he said in his status that he didn't fear death. He's not worried about death. He fears aging. He fears aging. So he would like to extend his life so he could continue to jump off these big towers and get that adrenaline rush because he thinks.
I fear being mutilated, and living mutilated is what I fear.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a legitimate fear because humans have so much to offer. I mean, with all our imperfections, they actually do. But then we say the word human, and then what is a human, and what is that idea? And is uploading continuing on, or is it next stage of evolution, or is it? It's a very interesting. And Dr. Aubrey Gray, you should talk to him about this.
Although, in the same breath, I'd love not to have to look things up on my phone. I'd love to be able to just like automatically connect to the computer through my head and like say, in my mind, say, hey, Google, look this up for me, or just get the information fed directly to me when I want it. I would love to be able to access that. That would be fantastic. But that would be, to me, that would be extending myself, not necessarily making me less human, but adding to me.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing our whole entire existence. We've been putting clothes on, and we've been building tools, and we've built the wheel, and we built chariots, and we've trained horses, and we've used dogs to protect our property, and we've done agriculture, and I mean, we've done a lot of stuff. And in the modern world, we've built electricity and computers, and so I'm not scared of any of that. It's all part of the natural. I mean, if you are scared of that, that's okay because that's part of being human as well. Because like the Amazonian people are humans, and they chose to be pacifists. They've chose to put their heads in the sand on technology, but that's what humans obviously do. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. Otherwise, we'd all be in a state of going into the next phase, or we'd all be Amazonians. Humans have different ideas, and it doesn't mean that. John Kerecz might not wake up tomorrow and say, hey, screw this, I'm going to go live with the Amish. I mean, maybe John Kerecz does that, but the other humans here, the other candidates here, they're going to march forward. So there's the divergence there. Humans are unique animals that can think conceptually and consciously about their decisions, and and they split off into their tribes and do what they feel is best. And some of them, but on the whole, on the mass, if you look around the world, and you've been around the world, you know how this is. They slowly change and adopt new ways of thinking and new traditions, and they evolve. And you even got something like the Catholic Church, which is 1,000,000 years old, and it still changes and evolves in a glacial pace, but it does it. I mean, it does it.
The Catholic Church has a lot more interest in science than you think they do. I've learned that through one of the classes I took on astrology, not astrology, but astronomy, and how they actually have astronomers and whole science divisions that look into things. And the Catholic Church is a lot more progressive than you think they are, actually. It's interesting to me,
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree. I mean, they're one of the most well-funded organizations on the planet. So I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. But they do adapt and change over time, sometimes glacially, and they try and pick political sides of things that sometimes backfires on them in the heat of the moment. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about on technology? Artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, 3D printing, quantum computing.
I do love the 3D printing. I just posted something on the Facebook page today about people actually using large 3D printers to actually make a housing. I just posted for people, and it was quite interesting how they were just using this large 3D printer to just go zoom, zoom, and actually print houses and be making houses. I think it's amazing, and the technology with 3D printing I think is interesting too because, excuse me again, what I have read about that is eventually they're looking towards everybody having a 3D printer. And like when you go to Walmart.com or you go to Amazon.com, what you actually buy is the design and the program to make something,
Mm.
not actually the item.
Mm.
And you order that design, that program, goes to your 3D printer, zoom, 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 it prints it, and there you have it. As long as you have the right stuff to put in it to print it to be what you want it to be. But that's an interesting technology that's going to change a lot of things, and it's changed a lot of businesses already with making. I've talked to and read about a bunch of different toy stores and toy places that make things, and you can do that when you order things yourself. You want to make, like, there might be things you want made for this campaign, even that someplace could make for you real quick, and they don't order it in China anymore. They just have a place that 3D prints it
Yeah.
on demand for you, and they make a bunch of it. But it's also interesting how they're trying to 3D print meat, also make hearts and different organs.
Mm.
I believe they had made that one heart. I don't know if they quite had the rhythmic of the heartbeat right and stuff, but they actually did make it, and that's interesting. Also, the idea of them printing meat for you, and the whole technology of also going off on the side there of growing meat instead of having the cows. And over here in the United States, I know there's Burger Kings over there in Australia, aren't there? Burger King, no Burger King. There's a Burger King.
We have one Burger King in Sydney Airport, and the rest are all owned by the Burger King franchise, which is called Hungry Jack's. It's the Aussie version.
Oh, okay. But Burger King now, they just started their Impossible Whopper, which is the vegetable fake meat. And the idea that is to help with the methane and everything that's produced from how we overstock pack the animals in, and I always say grow the animals, but because you kind of are growing the animals in a small spot, but hoping to save the environment with that. And some of the ideas of making meat and making food with 3D printers is interesting in itself too, and can save. I mean, when we go to Mars and we can print food, it's interesting to say print food, but the only thing I'm concerned with making food like that is I'm afraid of the loss of maybe some micronutrients that you're not sure that you're supposed to get. But I'm sure eventually we'll learn that. I mean, look at when we sailed to the new world from the old world, and people got scurvy, and you realize that they had to do this and that, and it's something we'll work out. And talking about technology, I think I posted something about an article on science is looking for health and medicine for people going to space. And I think while they're worrying about people going to the moon and living there, and going to Mars and living there, I think a lot of the science and the medicine they're going to look at might help us with things like dementia and heart failure and blood pressure problems and stuff, because they're going to have to deal with gravity changing and effects of the fluid flow in our bodies and how to deal with that. And I think people don't realize that there's going to be a lot of side science that comes from that helps us on the earth with longevity and our health. I think I kind of went around in circles there, but
yeah, well, the important one for people like yourself who want changes to their body to enhance their body is definitely this 3D printing in terms of 3D printing organs. And very very soon it'll be, I don't know, organ.com, and you just log on organ.com, and you're like, what type of heart do you have? What's the size of your valve? Oh, yep, okay. Do you want the Lamborghini one, or do you want the stock standard one, that we got on the cheap? And you'd buy it, and you'd go to the doctor, and he says, "Oh, yep, I just already printed it into the surgery office. Bang, there's your new heart." I mean,
better yet, you might be able to have the surgeon doctor that just does it right on your kitchen table for you.
Yeah,
puts
man,
it in for you.
Organ Uber, organuber.com. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely unlimited in that respect. And yeah, 3D printing is also, it's right. You're right. It's disruptive technology in the manufacturing sector. It's absolutely disruptive technology. We're going to see a whole bunch of new technologies come forward because it can print shapes that can't normally be manufactured out of traditional manufacturing methods, because traditional manufacturing methods too costly, too expensive, and too inefficient. And these can masterfully create all sorts of different shapes, which
Well, I
includes
think some
different
people are afraid of,
machines.
like you said, losing jobs over it because it changes industry. But like we had talked about last time, this country, our country, and all the world was mostly farming for a long time, and before that, it was hunting and fishing. And we were only in industrial nations and stuff for a short period. So this is
Mm,
something new, and there's going to be jobs. They're just going to be different jobs.
yeah.
And people have to realize there's going to be jobs out there for them to work. There's just going to be different jobs for them to work. And some of that's a fear, and they have to get over the fear that there are going to be jobs. They're just going to be different.
Mm, yeah.
I
Uh,
don't know your thoughts on that, but I think there's going to be plenty of jobs. They're just going to be different kinds of jobs.
Yeah, so that's a very like Austrian economist's perspective. So Ludwig von Mises and stuff, it's based on the fact that there's always scarcity. There's always scarcity. So therefore, it doesn't matter how much technology you produce, how many people you have in, how many people, whatever happens, there's always scarcity. So therefore, there will always be jobs, and that's a Misesian view, and that's a view shared by a lot of people in the Transhumanist Party. What the other argument is retraining. Can they retrain people in order to do that? And I mean, with increased longevity, so that a 40-year-old is now a 20-year-old, and he's feeling a lot healthier and fitter, and he has more of an incentive to retrain because he's not counting down 20 years until retirement or whatever. There would be more of an incentive to retrain and do new things and try new things. So, my suggestion would be for those people, prepare now. Otherwise you're going to be standing in a line, with a whole bunch of other people with signs saying, bring back our car industry, when the car plant will be right behind you. Like Japan has sorted this problem out. Japan has has deflation going on with their population. They have a decreasing amount of people, and they have quite a rich economy. But the way that they've buffered against their manufacturing is they've taken the manufacturing to the people. So in America, there you have a bunch of Yamaha plants and I don't know, Toyota and a whole bunch of plants over there. And because they find where their customers are, and they build a plant there, and then they ship all those cars out to their people there. I expect to see for heavy manufacturing and others things that I expect to see that model enhanced, it happen more. So they say, because the old mercantilist idea, what Trump's talking about, bring the manufacturing home, will only really work in a future global economy with the collapse of Bretton Woods in America. So you'll be just producing goods and services for America, for Fortress America, and that'll work great for Fortress America. But that means a dislocation for the world as a whole. And the world as a whole doesn't need America as much as America thinks the world as a whole needs it in terms of product export. North America, the United States, is one of the least integrated countries in the world. It's phenomenal how but it's got a very highly diversified economy. It's got a lot of money. It's got a lot of stuff. But it's not as integrated into the global economy as it thinks. Financially, absolutely, it's fundamental. So in that way, it's going to be very interesting because there'll be a lot of domestic production from this automation, but you will see a lot of American plant operators, manufacturers and stuff, and they will go to their customers. There's a bunch of customers in China. They'll go to that city. They'll build a plant there. They'll build whatever they're building for their customers in that area, and then they'll just dismantle the plant and move on. And that's the future operating method of manufacturing. It's temporary, it's quick, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's wherever your customers are.
So somebody made a point to me one time back when I was actually out of college, but still going over to the college to do some things, some jobs. When I was teaching there, I think it was, but some foreign students brought to my attention something we don't realize in this country. America is quite large, and we're kind of spoiled by the fact that traditionally we had a bunch of different areas in the United States that were almost like we were a bunch of different countries put together. We had different territories. We had desert. We have, wetlands. We got mountains. We're very diversified as far as our territory and what could be grown there and what could be used there. And they pulled to my attention that, over in Europe and stuff, they have to understand trade better because one country doesn't have everything. This country doesn't have that. That country doesn't have that. And I was surprised, too, sometimes when I travel, some countries don't even supply their own power. Yeah. They get power from other countries outside.
Yeah.
And my point to this is those countries have developed better trade and better ingenuity with how to work with each other because they've had to. And nothing against the United States, but we haven't had to do that. So therefore, we didn't develop that. And so when you come to a time when things are changing, it's something new to us to say, hey, we might need to work with this person to get this. And it's something we're not used to because for years we went without having to do that. So that's kind of different to this country than smaller countries that have to go across their borders for this and go across their borders for that. We didn't have to do that. So we've kind of gotten lazy a little bit in that factor because we didn't have to do that. So it is something kind of new to us,
America is unique in the fact that its geography is incredibly strong. It's got this huge Pacific, flank. It's got the Atlantic flank, so you haven't got really a threat of enemies coming across the border. Militarily. Your carriers, your 12 carriers or 11 carrier groups or battle groups or whatever, the rest of the world will catch up to that by 2150 or 2125. I mean, it's a long way ahead in terms of that.
And don't forget we're allowed to carry guns over here, so that always scares other people that come into this country because you don't know who's going to have a gun and who's not going to have a gun. So
and the China, you mentioned that, and the Chinese have actually done an official warning tourists about going to America because of quote unquote frequent mass shootings, which is just another one of these things in the trade wars or whatever. But so America's got that. Mexico and Canada are obviously your two closest neighbors. Mexico is a peso job. It's just there to you just want to foment as many problems down there to keep the peso low, which means manufacturing is low, and that's great. And then you could use it as a giant money laundering state. Canada actually, its biggest problem is Russia because Canada's always been in the front line of the Cold War. Because remember, the Earth is a sphere. And
right.
the missiles were always going to come over Canada, so Canada's
in fact,
always...
That's how I went to Russia, over Canada and over Alaska.
Yeah.
That's how I flew over to Russia.
Canada's always thought of itself as one of the primary victims of the Cold War, and so that's kind of interesting. But America doesn't have a foreign policy issue. You're talking about NAFTA. You're talking about Canada and Mexico. These two aren't very tough players. Mexico would be a third world Saharan desert junkyard if it wasn't right next door to the United States. And because it is right next door to the United States, it actually has a special status in the world. And that's the only reason it's anything at all.
My car was actually made in Mexico, I have to admit, talking about where Japan makes their parts and stuff. I have a Kia, which I'm very happy with. I've had a couple Kias, but it's not made in Korea. It's made in Mexico.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's what the CIA cartel job is fomenting as many problems in Mexico as it can, because then the peso falls. So if the peso falls, then manufacturing is cheaper, and that's why all your goods, even Japanese goods, Kia or South Korean or whatever it is coming up from Mexico, right? That's why Donald Trump makes Make America Great Again stuff in Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. That is kind of funny. What I think is funny, I hate to say this, is that you go to Native American events here in the United States, and when you look at where the stuff's made, it's either made in Mexico or in China.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be Native American stuff, and that's always kind of funny. It's like, okay, it's made in China, but it's
yeah.
So
that's a modern economy for you. Yeah, the
What else?
spaceman.
The spaceman. You wanted to talk about that next?
Oh well, this. I was just going through the chapters of the book, so
No problem.
the spaceman was the zenith, right? It was the zenith of your career, of your experience. Because what I actually found when I read this is, yes, you kind of enjoyed the experience, but you were also thinking about getting sick and stuff. But you enjoy the memories almost more than you enjoy this experience, right? Tell us about this. And what was the experience? We went over a little bit, but what was the experience? What was the
I
red
tell you that.
levers?
Yeah, don't pull the red lever because it makes the seat fly up. So that was a joke they joked me about when I came back too. Don't pull the red lever, and but no, it was one of those things where at first I was first had to postpone the trip because one of the engines was bad and they had to replace one of the engines. Now, of course, you want that to be fixed if you're going up to space. But that cost me some extra money there. And to be honest with you, when I did go up, I was recuperating from some bronchitis, which I didn't bring to their attention, but I got through it because I wanted to. With a lot of things, you want to get it done, and it's you don't want the fear to set in and stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
I tell you that when I was there, they did tell me that they've already had people that got strapped into the cockpit. And to tell you the truth, the cockpit you could be a little bit claustrophobic in the cockpit. Especially I'm 6'2", and right now I weigh 260, but then I think I was weighing around 240. And it wasn't the most comfortable fit being in there. And I could see wanting to say, oh, I'm not sure I want to do this. So to me, the push was to get through it so that I got it done. And I tell you that kind of was my main concern. And I do some work with Explore Mars Foundation. And I talked to people about that. And they said to me, well, how did you stay focused on it? And they asked that because they want to know how people stay focused on a trip if they're going up to Mars or something. I said, to me, I had in my mind that the trip only had a certain amount of time. All I had to do was hold it together for that certain amount of time. And once you get up there and you get doing it, I tell you, you can kind of lose yourself in it because it's kind of interesting. If you ever watch the film that's online, OSH Radio, there is a film we're doing now. It's very edited. What photos I have from the trip and what of the video is very edited because, of course, it does get edited by the Russian government. So there's only one little scene in the video where you can actually see the black of space because it's very edited down. But there's things where like you're upside down and my glove fell up and I just reached up and grabbed it. After a while, you're just kind of used to the fact that it's happening. And the 5.5 Gs that we were normally hitting, I did okay with that, which you consider that increases you like you're weighing 5.5 times your weight. But when we came in to land, I think he did it on purpose. He said we weren't landing right, and he kind of gunned it and we shot it around. And we went on up to like 7.8. And when those G's came off of me, I puked into the mouthpiece that was on me. And it was just all phlegm, though. But they had warned me about the eating light and stuff for breakfast. So I did. And the experience was great. I did get to help fly the MiG-29. Which was interesting. He kept telling me to pull the nose up because I kept going down low. But we did loops and we did spins and we flew upside down. And under his control, we did called the hammer, where you go straight up and they just like cut the engines for a second. You just fall down. You go straight up and it just whoom right down. And that was all pretty interesting. They told me that they have people that go over there that just go for that, just to fly the MiG-29, not to go to the edge of space. The edge of space is a little bit more expensive because it costs extra fuel to get to that height.
Yeah.
But the overall experience was good. But, when you're in the middle of it, you kind of want to get through it. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to black out at all either because that's why they have you in a pressure suit. The pressure suit squeezes you to keep the blood in your head. And, I'm not a trained astronaut or a trained pilot. So to me, in my mind, it was getting through that and then being able to enjoy it more after the fact. It's like, I did it. It's done. And I'll even admit that about going to the base camp about Mount Everest.
Yeah, let's talk
I
about that.
mean, I did that 2 years later after my hip surgery. Actually, I hiked the base camp Mount Everest six months after my hip replacement. And that was kind of one of those things where I want to kind of prove to myself that even though I wasn't as human as I had been, I could still do things. That's you kind of get that thought in your head. And I went the Tibetan route instead of the Nepal route because I wanted to, as we talked about, also spiritualism. I also wanted to get to visit the monasteries and stuff, and I got to see where the Dalai Lama used to live and rule from, if you want to call that ruling. And on the same trip after, let me just jump here a second, I also did some studying and practicing martial arts at the Shaolin Temple. So a lot of that trip had to do with not only going to Mount Everest, but also some spiritual journey also. So, but the minute you get off the plane and you're in Lhasa, you're already at a higher elevation and you feel it.
Yeah.
And
your lungs, right?
Yeah, you feel your head, you get like a headache. And a lot of people say it's like having a hangover. Now, I'm a non-drinker, so some of the people that did okay with it then go out drinking and they get extra sick more than they thought they would because it affects you. Although they are selling beer up there, but you got to realize most people are used to the elevation that are living up there. So the elevation is the kicker there. The base camp, I think, gets to 17,000 feet. And it gets a little hairy the night before. Now, the Tibetan side, they actually have like big 4-wheel drive buses that will take you all but to the base camp if you want.
Yeah.
Although
that's unusual because a lot of people go straight to base camp. They go up and down from base camp, get used to the elevation, then head up this mountain. Right? You've done it. You've done the other way. You've done the Edmund Hillary way, right?
Well, there is below the base camp. There's what's called the tent camp. And that's where you sleep the night and get more acclimated before you go up that way, depending on how you go up. Now, out of our group of about 20 people, only 2 of us actually hiked it. Myself and one other young gentleman that was actually a film. He worked on films, production on films, and he had a slightly malformed hip, and I had a hip replacement. And I had to laugh because we were the people that were actually hiking it. Actually, I did come back with some sprained muscles at my one rib and a little bit of pneumonia on the one side because we hiked it and we decided to take our own little shortcut. We thought was a great idea, which he only weighed 140 and I weighed like 245, and the hill he could go up at 140 was more forgiving for him than it was for me. Let me just put it that way. I started sliding down the hill and breathing heavy. But it was quite enjoyable. But getting back, the tent camp the night before, you're already at a high elevation, between 15 and 16, I think it was, and you're in a tent. They're burning yak dung because they use yaks for everything. Food, building, shampoo, clothing. Yaks are the multi-purpose animal, and so you're in a tent with a bunch of people and they're burning yak dung. And then outside there's trucks that are burning diesel that they have to keep running because you realize it gets very cold at night because of the thin atmosphere. It'll go down into the negatives at night and go up to like 70 during the day, depending because there's a thinner atmosphere. And so then you have to deal with the yak dung burning, the diesel fuel burning, and also the fact that you're already low in oxygen. So you're already like, oh. And I talked to some people that had a hard time sleeping. The minute they'd fall asleep, they'd wake up and panic because of lack of not having oxygen. But there were some people also taking medicine. There's medicine you can take that helps you. And also a lot of people were using the air tanks. They have little air tanks that you just put on your face and you push it and it gives you oxygen. So, but then me and the other gentleman, we were the 2 that hiked. There were a few other people that hiked. And our joke is the fact that when you go back down and you go back into the city, you run into all these people that say, oh, yeah, we hiked it. And you're like, oh, when did you hike it? And they tell you, oh, yesterday afternoon. And we're like, well, we were hiking it yesterday afternoon and we didn't see you out there. So we ran into a bunch of people that said they hiked it. And we're like, I'm not sure about that. We were out there hiking it and we didn't see you. So But it was a great experience. I'm not sure how much I'd want to do it again though. I don't really, I didn't really enjoy the high altitude. Now since then, of course, I have been in Colorado and been at the Continental Divide, which goes up to 14.4, and I was out there snowmobiling and did get quite a headache from that. I learned that ibuprofen is a good thing. I probably should have taken that more when I was in the Himalayas too, but it did greatly help. So I've been to other elevations again since, but not 17. I haven't been to 17,000 feet. So I'm not sure if I want to do it again. I love the experience. I love being able to see the sky from up there, and the view is beautiful, and the night sky of the stars and everything is beautiful, and it's nice to have experienced it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, going up Mount Everest, did you actually end up going right to the top?
No, just the base camp.
Just base camp, right? Yeah, okay.
I think the top is like 29,000 feet or something.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's madness.
It's like another 12,000 feet. I'm not sure. And you're right, though, that the climbing technique is the fact that they will climb higher than they're going to sleep, and then they come back lower a little bit. So they kind of get semi-acclimated for a slightly higher, and they go up and down. They kind of zigzag up and down to get used to it, to be able to breathe. But I know what it was like at 17. I'm not sure about the 29. I actually have to admit I did do some of that training with wearing one of the masks that restricts your breathing. And I did some cardio training on the elliptical because I can't really do steppers and stuff with the hip. But on the elliptical, I did a lot of training with the mask on to restrict my breathing, to get me used to having restricted breathing before I went.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and like, it's interesting. I like how you went on a spiritual journey while you were there, because I remember in the book you said that you have a rule of travel, and it's, if you're going somewhere, you can never quite be sure that you'll ever return. So basically do as much as you can and plan around the activity that you centrally want to do. And so I think like doing some judo or kung fu or whatever it was you were doing.
Tai Chi, actually. I said Kung Fu, yeah.
Yeah, it's all. Sorry, I'm not very well versed on martial arts, but so some Tai Chi while you're there, and doing some spiritual stuff, and having a look at the temples, and having a look at the historical monuments and sites while you do this. I think that's a fascinating compliment to that adventure as well. Yeah, so well done on that. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your travels? You went to Egypt, and we talked about this a little bit before, but you've been to Egypt.
Well, talking about what you just said was, actually, I did the Mount Everest, and then I had to be back at the Shaolin Temple in like 4 days. So I had 4 days there to kill, and that's when I planned my trip of Egypt, Rome, Istanbul, Athens, and Seoul, Korea. And actually, my plan was for actually no staying anywhere. I was supposed to be constantly on the go. I was planned to sleep on the planes and at the airports, and I was country hopping. And that worked fine to Egypt, and then to Rome. And then when I went to Istanbul and was going over to Athens, Greece had an airport strike. So I ended up staying in Istanbul unplanned. Although they took very nice care of me, put me up at a very nice Marriott and everything, and it was very nice. But I ended up getting less of a tour of Athens than I wanted to. I ended up getting the taxi hour tour of Athens, not the actual tour I was supposed to get.
Oh, okay, I understand. Yeah,
because of the shortened time period. I got to see some nice parts of Seoul. And funny, we talked about Japan before. I got something in my throat. Hang on, sorry. But I originally wanted to go to Tokyo. But the price to go to Tokyo was so much larger than the price to go to Seoul.
Okay, yeah.
That I went to Seoul instead. Actually, it was thousands of dollars difference, and I was surprised by that. It was going to cost me a couple thousand to go to Tokyo, and it cost me a couple hundred to go to Seoul.
Yeah.
So on this trip, it was Seoul I went to, which I very much enjoyed. The when I had been there at the palace, they were having. I guess it's common for them to dress up in the old outfits of the day and like role play. That was very interesting when I was there in Seoul.
Yeah, Seoul's a great place. You know, capital of South Korea. Yeah, a lot of history there. It's allowed you've seen it at a very unique time in its history as well, where it's actually allowed to be a country because you know for most of its existence, it's been a quasi kingdom, quasi country that hasn't really been allowed to function rightly because of all the Mongolian invasions and Han Chinese domination and Japanese invasions. But you've seen it at a very unique period of time, which I think people don't fundamentally understand. So
another interesting thing, it was right. I was in Egypt and in Istanbul right before that. I guess around somewhere in 2016, the fighting broke out in both those countries, and the security was very strict in both those countries when I was there. Very much, you know, armed guards at the hotels and metal detectors, and you know,
especially
those
for
were
Westerners.
those were the two countries that had the most security actually when I was traveling, even more than when I was in Russia. Were those two countries.
All right, let's
actually in Russia. The Russians were very nice to me when I was in Russia too. I find there's a lot of British people in Russia all the time, and they like talking to me because of my American English instead of the British English.
Ah, right, understood. Yeah. There's a lot of Russophiles from the UK that go to Russia. Yeah, you'd find huge amounts of them, little British towns and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, cool. Let's talk about the race for a bit. So how are you feeling in your campaign? And you know, who's on your radar? We've seen in the campaign, you know, this union alliance between Ben Zion and Kimberly Forsyth. Are you planning to join with anyone in the race? Are you planning to have a VP, preference each other? Are you looking out for anything? What's your ideas of the campaign?
Well, I'm kind of like I don't really want to get into making an alliance at this time. I think we see how it works out. If I am become the main runner in the long run, I would probably then try and evaluate it based on who's more similar to my views and also who is more liked by the people also. So kind of be a double factor. I will look at that to be my vice president. Or vice versa, if I would end up being someone else's vice president.
And these two, for example, Ben Zion and Kimberly Forsyth, have joined up alliance. But that would like, hypothetically, if you won, would you look at either of those two, or would you eliminate them from a possibility?
No, I think anybody that's running right now could be a possibility. I look at the fact that there's a lot of I don't always think that you have to agree with someone on all things for them to be part of what you're doing. So someone I would pick for a vice president necessarily wouldn't have to be on board with me with everything, and I would hope they would not be. I would actually hope that they would add to myself or I would add to them and round each other out, than necessarily have to be of the exact same mold or thought process. I think that in just like your personal relationships, I think having differences brings more to the table than being homogeneous.
So, are you on board with what's your view on Humanity Plus?
I really haven't given it a lot of thought. I'm not really sure. I haven't really given it a lot of thought.
So undecided?
Yes.
Well, that's actually quite a good policy right now because you won't upset anybody if you say that. So no comment is actually probably the best type of comment. But you know the Haywires in that camp will probably try and convince you one thing, and the Ben Zion camp will probably try and convince you the other. But you're going to have both those factions down your throat trying to win you over. So prepare for that.
That's okay. I mean, like I said, you know, I don't believe everybody has to have the same views. I think you have to round each other out. I think everybody you will find has some good and some bad in everything they think. Even myself, I'm sure that there's some of my own ideas that I have might not work out, but sometimes you have to be. I think the main thing is though to be a little fluid, and if you try and go a certain way and things aren't always working out, sometimes you have to slightly reform it. Not totally give up on it, but slightly reform it.
Do you like anybody's platform? Are you attracted to anybody else's platform, or do you think that you have a solid platform and you know, and you're very comfortable with your own platform?
Well, I myself would kind of like to. I'm big on pushing education, pushing the environment. I believe that longevity is the key to us solving a lot of problems. I do like the idea of the 222, but like we had talked about before, I worry about the fact how I see people react to what they consider socialism. I don't necessarily think that it's socialism, but I hear people say that with about a lot of things in this country, and I hear people talking and working with government people. It's like anytime somebody talks about giving people things how it's socialism. Oh, if we make sure people have this and that, then it's socialism. It's like I don't think so. That's making sure your people are taken care of, because as long as the people are taken care of, then we can move forward with other things. Uh, so I do like that. I like the ideas right now. I do like the regular Democrats right now pushing that new Green Deal. I do like the ideas of that. I like any of the things that are based on the New Deal, which is actually a proven idea that worked years ago. And we talked about jobs, and you're giving people jobs and making sure they have jobs. And I like that and would want to incorporate a lot of those concepts
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. Franklin D. Roosevelt's, you know, New Deal project. Yeah, um, yeah. Mr. Holsopple seems like you guys could get along. Also, if you're pushing longevity really hard, I mean that's a natural ally with Ben Zion. Culturally, you line up with you know, with the cultural aspects. You've got your cultural candidate, who is the Haywire campaign. Um, you know,
Although I did say last time I believe in all kinds of art, not just humanistic art.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, and what do you think of Mr. Shacky? Have you seen much of Mr. Shacky?
I've seen a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, yeah. He's got some interesting ideas. I'd like to. You should watch his show with me, and you should hear about his UBI policy, which is fairly interesting. On hostels. Hostels across the country, but he's interesting in the fact that he's changed the conversation on UBI. So, you mentioned just then that you know, UBI and the 222 ish sounds a bit socialisty, and you know,
Well,
in America.
I don't I like the idea of supporting our people and providing for them and making sure that there's a minimum, but I know that there's a resistance to that because of people resisting the socialist idea, and I don't
And
necessarily think socialism in some extent is bad. It's just the fact it has to come across in a way that it is embraced and not rejected. I think I don't
well,
know how we can do that.
yeah, well, your guy for that is Jonathan Chatke, because he's changed the conversation on it quite dramatically. Even if those ideas got up to a national level, you know, he's changed the conversation on that. So, I recommend talking to Jonathan about some of these issues, because he's a Mises guy. He's an Austrian economist guy. He's a free market guy, and he detests socialism at all levels. But he's talking about a different change UBI perspective. So, very interesting coming out of that camp on that. Yeah, but longevity, yeah, Ben Zion. If you really care about, yeah, industrial, you know, industrial, yeah, morphological freedom and this other things, yeah, that's your Ben Zion type idea. You flay across all these candidates though. Just touch on all these candidates. So yeah.
Well, maybe we can have a president and two vice presidents.
Yeah, we'll have to get you on a panel show with some of these people and have to have a talk about this to try and flesh out some of the policy ideas, because I'd like to see I've seen your platform, I've seen your policy. I'd like to see I'd like to see a bit more, and how they line up with other people's on specific issues and stuff like that as well, though.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, we'll work on that. I know I'm kind of difficult with my timing. I'm sorry about that right now. I was asked about that if I was chosen to be the actual candidate, I would have to relinquish some of my jobs so I could put more time to this. Yeah. Which is what I would plan to do if I was chosen as the actual candidate. Right now, I would be willing to work with any of the other candidates. I mean,
so
like I said,
that's the news right there. So you're open to seeing who's a strong runner, and you
I
might
believe
be the
in the
golden
fact that
teeth.
differences can add to each other, not detract, but add. So if someone doesn't have the same views as me, or I don't have the same views as them, I don't consider that a bad thing. I consider that a good thing.
All right. Any final comments before we wrap this up?
No. No matter what happens in this campaign, as you see, I am out there. I have my books. I have other things. I am planning on getting more active in politics again, even if this does not work out. That was my goal. So no matter what happens, you will be still hearing from me. I will be around. And hopefully I'll still be coming on here and talking to you. Maybe in 100 years, we can be doing another show.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
It'll be 3D by that time.
Yeah, or telepresence or teleportation or I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, even if you do leave the party, you're always welcome on the show. And I'm not saying you're going to leave. I'm saying you're a candidate. But
I wasn't playing. No,
forever's a long time. That's what I'm trying to
say. Forever. We'll set the date. Let's see. 3,265 Thursday at 3:00. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me. That's a date. All right, John J. Kerecz, thanks so much for coming on Debt Nation.
Well, thank you very much. Look forward to meeting and talking to you again.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.